Hey, what's happening, Wargamers? Welcome to I guess this is just sort of like an update on the state of the game for Marvel Crisis Protocol. So for anyone who has been connected to the interwebs, AMG dropped what some would consider a bombshell, others would consider an interesting piece of information regarding their upcoming timeline events. This was something that they had discussed earlier in the year, that we were going to be seeing a shakeup to a type of event structure that they wanted to do. They were calling it timelines. We didn't really know much at the time. They hinted at some stuff, but they dropped the full documents as of Friday, November 10th. And it is a doozy. It has generated a ton of conversation already throughout the community. And, here's just kind of some of my knee-jerk reactions to it, because it sounds like there's a lot of voices out there, and there's a lot of disagreement on what sort of impact this might have on the game. And you need to have as many sort of thoughts and opinions on the matter to kind of formulate what you want to think. So let's go over the Coles notes of what this new timeline event is. Basically, AMG is introducing what they like to consider like their premier, their prestige event for Adepticon. It's attended for 32 or more people. It's going to be a six round Swiss tournament followed by 3 rounds of cuts, so 9 games in total. And the whole idea is that they want this event to sort of cater to the most competitive minded players in the Marvel Crisis Protocol community. And their idea being that with certain restrictions, which we'll get into in just a second, that with these restrictions, the best of the players will basically be the best, or as a certain Macho Man used to say, the cream will always rise to the top. So what are these restrictions that we're talking about? Well, first off, they released a timeline list. And this timeline list, much like the standard list that we have now, basically outlines every character, affiliation, tactics card, and crisis card that will be usable in this timeline event. So, I mean, that in and of itself doesn't sound too bad. It creates some interesting decision points when it comes to list building. It has the ability to remove what could be considered problematic characters cards. There's still the banned and restricted list. So in and of itself, that doesn't sound too bad. Okay, well, let's move on to the next point. What's the next part of this whole thing? Well, for this event, you have to bring 3 rosters, which means you're bringing 30 characters. Now, of course, you might also be asking, well, why 30 characters? Why can't you maybe have some overlap in the rosters? Well, one of the restrictions that goes into this is that at no point can you double up on characters, tactics cards, or crisis cards. So you have to bring 3 completely unique rosters with each one with 10 unique characters, 10 unique tactics cards, and 6 unique crisis cards. So right there, like that's a big restriction. And it's probably one of the more contentious points of this particular thing. But okay, so those are 2 of the restrictions right now. What is another one of them? Well, you have to play each one of their rosters. The way they have this the Swiss round set up is basically you've nominated a roster 1, roster 2, roster 3, and AMG wants you to sequentially go through 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 during the Swiss rounds. Then if you make cuts, they swap things up, and all of a sudden it's 3, 2, 1. So what does this all mean together? Because this is a lot going on to it. So what does it mean for Crisis Protocol in general? What does it mean for people who want to go to the events? And what does it mean for the way the community is going to organize their own events? The knee-jerk reaction has basically said that this event is one of 2 things. There's people who are kind of excited for what this event might entail, and all the power to them, and there's people who have expressed some concern for what this event entails. And then there's this weird oddball group that basically use whatever they can to say that MCP is dying, it's dead. This is going to be the last thing. Those people are being hyperbolic. I'm not sure if they're trolls or not, but they're being hyperbolic. MCP is definitely not dead. What this will do, though, is it's going to have interesting implications on the way the community organizes and plays these sort of games. I know there's been people out there who have been trying to say, no, it's going to be fine. People aren't going to do that. But if enough people pick up this particular way of wanting to play games, the timeline events, it's going to have an interesting knock-on effect, because what's going to happen is the competitive-minded players, they want to get their reps in. They want to learn their list. They want to get as many reps in against other competitive lists as they can, which that makes perfect sense. You practice. You want to practice. You want to get better at the game that you're playing. But when they want to get better at the game that they're playing, it means that the players that they're playing with have to make a decision. They either have to make a list in the same format and kind of play by those same rules, or they have to not. They have to keep doing things as they want to do. And if we end up getting enough in both camps, we might end up with a situation where we create a little bit of a divide within the competitive community. Now, that's not to say that this is definitely going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. As we get closer to Adepticon, we might see opinions on both sides shift. We might see more excitement. We might see AMG pivot. We don't know, and that's the big thing right now. But let's talk about some of the actual impacts that we know that this will have on it. And the first one being, and I think this is kind of my personal big one, is that it places a lot of what could be considered arbitrary restrictions on the way you engage with the game. If you want to participate in this event, you have to play by certain rules. Now, we've already gone over a number of the restrictions, but one other point that I hadn't touched on yet was not every character is available in this timeline. The 2024 timeline actually has quite a few notable exceptions. It has about 75 characters available in a game where I think we're, like, once you factor out like grunts and transforming characters, I think we're at like around 155, almost 160 characters for Marvel Crisis Protocol. And they've slashed that in half, in almost more than half, depending on the numbers. And it's not like they've just gotten rid of certain members. They've gotten rid of some really interesting ones here. Like, for instance, the Inhumans are just, they're not in there. The Guardians of the Galaxy, gone. Black Order, not in there as well. Some notable omissions from the Avengers are gone. Like Sam Wilson isn't in there. The Incredible Hulk, the Immortal Hulk. We don't have Malekith. We don't have Asgard. There's a lot of characters, a lot of characters who would be considered favorites for a lot of people are just gone. So sure, we've gotten rid of like the big beefy guys like Dormammu, Malekith, Immortal Hulk, Hulkbuster, Incredible Hulk, Cosmic Ghost Rider. They're all absent from this list. And it's a very interesting decision to make, because we're now getting these discussions going on where people are basically saying, it's like, well, with the extra restrictions, that just means people building lists are now building within this certain framework. And if they can win in this list, that means that they're better players just in general. And I think at surface level, yes, that can be an argument that can be made for it. But at the same time, I feel like they've put a giant asterisk on this, basically saying you're the best players when you don't have to deal with some of these either meta-defining characters or these characters that kind of flip the script on a couple interactions. Like, for instance, if I recall correctly, Kingpin is not available either for Criminal Syndicate. They're pushing you into New MODOK, Scientist Supreme, or Claw for your leaderships there. So we've created it's created this interesting dynamic where they're trying to say, play this event, be considered the best of the best, but they've put all these caveats on it where it's removing basic challenges to the game. And I don't quite know if that's the right way of going it. I think it's interesting. I'm not going to deny that it's interesting. I think generally speaking, if you take a lot of these points on their own, I think individually they're all kind of interesting. Altogether is where I think there's some concern. But yeah, so that's one big thing right there. We basically have an event that AMG has basically said, you can't play with toys that you specifically like. If you're the player who, maybe loves playing Black Order, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Convocation, for instance, well, I guess this event's not for you. You don't play this event because none of those affiliations are in the list. If you're like me and you're a Shield player, I like playing Nick Fury Jr. He's not in the list. If I play Shield, I have to play Invincible Iron Man. If somebody enjoys playing the Incredible Hulk, unfortunately they're out of luck. They can't do it. If they like Guardians, they can't do it. So they've come in and they've basically said you can't play with these toys of yours, and that's a caveat for entering this event. And unfortunately, I realize it's a limited event in that regard, but it never feels good to be told you can't participate in something that you might have been excited for. And I have personally spoken with a few people who they were excited to try and get into AMG's premier event this year, and it's now just kind of become, well, no, we're gonna do side events because they can't play with the toys they like. So that's one of the first big issues that we're having with this whole discussion. Another big issue is just it's kind of the perception of it. You look at the list, and a lot of the characters are on it. They're really pushing the new core box characters. They're pushing a lot of recent release characters. For instance, if you want to play Wakanda, you can't take regular Black Panther or Killmonger. You have to take King T'Challa or the Killmonger Usurper, which are coming out in the Warrior Falls sometime in the new year. So they're pushing this a lot of the newer models, which, okay, fair, they are still a company that need to make money, but the perception of it is it's not strong optics when you're being told no, you can't play with the old stuff, especially after so many people were concerned that the new core box was going to invalidate the old core box characters, and there was this narrative saying no, don't worry, they're still perfectly usable, playable, but now in what's considered their premier event, they're not. Not only that, but we've seen that like they're pushing a lot of the new X-Men and all sorts of stuff. But even going beyond that, we have the added issue that you need to have 30 characters. So the person who maybe plays competitively, but they play one roster competitively, and those people do exist. They do exist. I know a few of them personally. They are locked out of this. They might be really competitive people, but because they're not buying as much as other people, or they're buying the wrong packs, they can't play in this event. And that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate aspect of gatekeeping, and I think it is a concern. So to kind of wrap up a lot of the thoughts on this one, because I don't want to just be that guy that rambles on nonstop about this. I think what's going to happen here is we're going to have an event that there's going to be a lot of discussion about it. There's going to be a lot of contentious opinions on the matter. And it's going to be hard for people to come to a consensus for a little bit. As we get closer to the event, we're probably going to see the conversation die down. People are probably going to be accepting of this particular format. But as long as AMG continues to use the language of this being sort of like their premier event, there's going to be this narrative that this is the competition that matters. And if this is the competition that matters, what's going to happen to all the other types of competitive MCP? And that's going to require the communities, your local communities, to come together and make a conscious decision. Do you want to keep playing the way that, like, the standard competitive version of Crisis Protocol? Do you want to play the timelines? Do you want to do some version of both? Or do you want to treat the new timeline as almost like a sort of like a side event type thing? I've seen people already discussing, you know what, maybe we turn this into a league. And I think that's actually a fantastic idea. Doing that as a league is still kind of interesting. Even if you still have to consider the gatekeeping aspects of it. But it's going to dominate the conversation for a little bit. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to get a lot of opinions on both sides of the coin mellow on this. And generally speaking, I think what's going to happen is people are probably going to fall into the camp of, well, this is a thing. It's going to exist. And whether or not AMG sees enough success with it to continue on remains to be seen. But so far, from what we've seen from the design teams behind Crisis Protocol, they do kind of like to stick to some things if they get any glimmer of hope. Like let's just forget about the other Challenger documents that came out a little while ago with the veto powers that we haven't heard from for a long time. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is kind of what's going on with this premier event. As you can probably tell from my tone, I'm kind of on the side of I don't think this is the right approach to doing it. I personally was really, really excited about maybe taking part in their premier event until I saw all the rules for it, and it really kind of killed any excitement for me personally. But I'm going to watch it. I'm going to see I'm going to see what other people come up with. I'm going to watch the discussion about it, and I'm just going to make a little plea to the general public at this point. Try not to be too hard on the people who have a different opinion than you. There are people who seem to be really excited by this event, and all the power to them. There's people who are concerned about the event. Let them be concerned. Try not to be dismissive of either opinion. Don't be dismissive of it. We need to have that discourse. The only thing I will say is the game's not dying. If you're one of the doomsayers that think that this is a clarion call that MCP is on its way out, it's dead. Nah, we're probably still fine. You don't get a license like Marvel without getting the go ahead for a couple of years on this particular thing, and we're only into this fourth year. It's still got life under its belt on this one. But have those conversations with your local meta. Talk to the other people you play with. Follow the conversations and try to get differing points of view. Don't just rely on the fan server, the TTS server. Don't just rely on anything you might get from the official AMG Discord. Look around, see what other people are saying, and try to formulate your opinion based on that. In the meantime, though, remember these are just my potato opinions, and yeah, that's about it. So yeah, leave your comments below. Get involved in the discussion down here, even, and let's see where this experiment takes us with MCP. I'm generally still excited about the new year. I think there's a lot of really exciting releases coming up. This definitely does not dampen any of that excitement. So let's see what's going on. In the meantime, leave your comments, hit that like, subscribe, join me on Patreon, and of course, happy wargaming.